Hello everybody, and a very warm welcome back to Tony Northeastern. I am glad that you've made it back for the return leg of the next episode. So, just before we get stuck into the station, there's one little detail I want to add to this loco. So, I bet you have guessed what is missing from the loco. Yep. A loco crew. I'm surprised it wasn't picked up when we did the running video a few weeks back. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to get a little bit of super glue and just dab it on their feet and try and get the driver as far in the cab as possible. Whoops, I've just knocked him over. So I'll try. So I'm using these curved tweezers because it's ideal for getting right in there. Now you could take it all apart. I suppose you could take the tender off and you'll have full access to the cab. So I'm just going to dip his feet into the super glue and see if I can push him right in there. And see if he'll stick. Right, so that's the driver in. What I might do is I'll put the fireman on the tender. Just got to stand him up. Don't know why I'm whispering. There you go, I think that finishes that off. So the next phase of the build is to have some lamps hanging down the centre of the concourse area, and also to get rid of these unsightly cables that have been sticking out of the side of the building for the last month or so. And the idea I've come up with is to stick two pieces of old double gauge rail together, but sandwich them with a piece of plastic card in between and isolate the rails from each other. So the idea is I'll have the positive feed on one rail and the negative feed on the other. I'm going to try and see if it works. So as you can see, if I push these rails into the holes that I've already pre-drilled, now the holes are slotted with a 2mm drill bit, and that will sit in there nicely. And then when I come to do the roof, which goes across the top, I'll be able to tie it in with maybe some plastic card or something else, which will give it a bit of strength. So the ceiling lamps I'm going to use from S&M Models. You get 5 in a packet. They've got their own website there, SM Models Railways.co.uk. The cables themselves are a bit long, as you can see, so I'm going to have to trim them down so they're about 20mm away from the edge of that insulation there, and then solder the resistor back on. Hopefully have them hanging down the center on that rail, and then soldering the live to the top and the negative to the bottom. That is the cunning plan. So here we are at the bench, and the first thing I want to do is put some heat shrink on either end of these rails, just to give it a bit of protection against the building, just in case. So I'm just going to put that on there, about 10mm worth, and then just use the back of the soldering iron to shrink it on there. Although this will be super glued into the building as well, the heat shrink will just act as an insulator between the card and the rails. Right, now that I've heat shrink both ends, I'm just going to check to make sure there's no short between the two rails. I'm just going to make sure that that plastic in between the rails is doing its job and keeping both rails insulated. So I'll just, right, so that's reading, and then hopefully one on there, nothing. That's good. And then nothing. Right, so now we can start soldering our lamps to the rails. Right, now that we've checked our rails, the next thing I want to do is just put a little bit of solder where we're going to join it onto the building. Just pre-ready. One bit there. And one bit there. At either end. Okay, so that's going to be the negative one, and the other one's going to be the positive. So as you can see, I have already took the resistor off and shrunk the cables right down. So now it's just a case of resoldering the resistor back onto the live, and then insulating it with some heat shrink. Now it's important that you cover all of that wire in there, because you don't want that touching the rail. So I'm just going to use the back of the soldering iron just to shrink it down. Right, as you can see, I've already tinned this little wire coming out of the resistor. So I'm just going to dip it in the flux and then solder it to the top rail, which is the live. So bearing in mind that all this is going to be painted, so I might disguise that as a electrical box or something, but we'll see when we come to that bit. And then the other wire will then go on the bottom rail, which will be the neutral. Right, and so here we have the first ceiling lamp attached to the beam. As you can see, it's been soldered top and bottom now, and I've added a little bit of heat shrink there just to give that a little bit of support. So let's give it a test. So the green is the live cable and the grey is the negative. There you go, so that works. So I've only got 4 more to do. Right, so I've soldered them all together, so we'll just give it one final test. There you go, all 5 bulbs are lit. Right, so the next thing to do is to fix it into the building. Right, so as you can see, I have now wired the lamps in and glued the beam in place. Super glued it into the walls. And they look quite smart. Just about the right height. So I guess it's time to turn them on. Right, so after 3. 1, 2, 3. As you can see, all the LEDs are working. So, that's the lamps done. Now, it's time to move on to the roof. The good thing about this bar, having this bar here, if I ever needed to solder any more cables, maybe onto this side, all I've got to do is scrape the paint back here and put a little bit of solder there. You do the same to the other end on the negative side, and then I can run some cables through to this side of the platform. But if the roof's on, might not be able to do that, so we'll just have to wait and see. And these are the coffee stirring sticks I'm using. They're birch wood, they're quite good quality, and you get 1,000 in a packet, and I think I'm going to need about 500 of these things by the time I'm finished. I have made up a jig so I can build all the trusses. Now there's quite a few trusses to make, as you can imagine, so the only way to do it is to jig it up. It's not going to be the same as it is in the photographs, but it will still look pretty good, I think, once it's finished. So we have our pieces of wood lying in there at the minute, just waiting to be glued. As you can see, I have placed a little spigot in the middle. It'll all come clear as the video progresses. This is to leave a little gap in the top so I can feed a coffee stirring stick through that way. So that'll be like the ridge of the apex. So let's start sticking one of these together. So all I'm doing is I'm using little bits of paper, and basically I'm just going to put a bit of glue across the top of each piece that's in there, and then just lie the paper onto it, because I want to be able to take it out of the jig as quickly as possible. Otherwise it'll end up sticking to the jig. I'm just using PVA wood glue and just line a piece of paper across like so. Once I've got that in all the places where there's a joint, we should be able to take it out. It's a bit fiddly. Right, hopefully that should just be able to pop out, so he says. something like that. So I'll put the paper on the opposite side now, and here is the jig without the truss on. So what you do is just give it a quick clean up once you've taken the rafter out. Right, so that's my first attempt. I think I'll make the pieces of paper a little bit smaller for the next one. And here is the second one, and it's turned out a lot better than the first one. I have reduced the size of the paper, as you can see, and it don't take long for these to go off. They're going off pretty quick. Anyway, let me show you how these are going to work over at the station. So I've moved on a little bit, and I think I forgot to mention that if you make templates of all your components, like here I've got the left, I've got the middle beam, and I've got the right, it just helps to make them more or less exactly the same. And a little template for the center spans as well. So yeah, it does help to have all these little templates. So the cunning plan is to make about 20 of these, and as you can see they will come along this edge and this edge, and the little notch on the right hand side sits neatly on the iron girder, and the idea then is to have a piece of brick lintel all the way along this edge for the other side, the left hand side, to sit on. That is the cunning plan. So moving on a bit, as you can see I have partially done some of the rafters. This is the far end on the southern side, and this is what it's going to look like. Obviously they will be painted, and I've got to trim some of the paper bits off, because on this side I've used little bits of paper to glue the rafters to the running boards, as it were. But on this side the running board has been notched. As you can see, if I can just twist it round, it's been notched to take the rafters, and then a little lip has been allowed just so it sits level onto the beam. So let's go and have a look what it looks like at the station. As you can see, I have added a brick ledge all the way along on this wall here, but I've left a gap here. Now the reason why I've left the gap here is this window is going to be part of the concourse of the station. Originally it never was. That was always left outside to the elements, but you could not see it. So my intention is to build the roof up to this apex here when I come along in this direction. So let's have a look at the first set of rafters. As you can see, that will sit on that ledge like so. So as that comes along, the top apex of the rafters will continue right away through to the end. But this timber here will stop here, and somehow, I haven't configured it yet, but it'll come up and then meet this apex and then continue on again. So but in the meantime I still have 12 more of these rafters to make. So I nearly managed to finish the rafters. I've just got past the rose window there, so we've still got a few more left to do. And with those lights hanging down there, kind of lights up the concourse area quite nicely. Right, so I think that's all for this week. Thanks for joining me, guys, and hope to see you next week. So, bye for now. Bye. Right away, Barney. Okay, Mr. Simpson.